Imagine waking up one morning and reaching for your phone before you are fully awake. You scroll for a few minutes. Someone just got promoted. Someone moved to a city you once dreamed about. Someone your age seems to know exactly where their life is going. You put the phone down, but the feeling stays. Nothing bad has happened. No one has spoken to you. No one has forced you to compare. And yet the day already feels heavier. That is the strange part. You are free to look away, free to ignore it, free to live your own life. But somehow, you still carry the weight of other people's lives into your own. You start wondering if you are too slow, if you are wasting time, if you are becoming the wrong kind of person. You are not trapped. The morning is still yours. No one is stopping you from living it. But somehow, it no longer feels free. It feels like a race you were entered into before you even got out of bed. And before your day has even begun, what was supposed to feel like freedom already feels like pressure. Today, we are going to explore why modern freedom so often makes people feel anxious, restless, and strangely far away from themselves. Before we go deeper, notice what just happened. You only looked at your phone for a few minutes, but somehow, someone else's life has entered yours. You can close the app, but you cannot quite close the comparison. That is the first thing we need to understand. The phone is not the real problem. It only shows the problem more clearly because the pressure was already there. Modern life tells you that your path is open. You can choose. You can start again. You can become someone different. That sounds like freedom. But here is the part we rarely talk about. An open life is not always a lighter life. Sometimes it means there is no script to follow, no fixed answer to trust, and no one else to blame when you do not know who you are becoming. Think about choosing a career. It is not just a job anymore. It becomes a sign of whether your life is going somewhere. Think about moving to a new city. It is not just a place to live. It starts to feel like a statement about the kind of person you are trying to be. Even rest becomes strange. You are free to slow down. But the moment you do, you feel as if someone else is moving ahead. This is where freedom begins to change its weight. The problem is not that you have no choices. The problem is that every choice starts to carry too much meaning. A choice no longer feels like a choice. It feels like evidence. Evidence of whether your life is moving in the right direction or quietly drifting away from it. And this is where anxiety enters. Not because someone is controlling you, not because your life is already decided, but because nothing is fully decided. You are free. And that means the question keeps coming back to you. What should I do with this life? What should I become? How do I know if I'm wasting it? At this point, many people think the solution is simple. They think they just need more confidence, a clearer plan, a better morning routine, a stronger mindset. But let us go one layer deeper. What if the anxiety is not caused by a lack of discipline? What if it comes from something much more basic? The fear that if you choose wrong, you will not simply fail at something. You will become someone you cannot respect. This is why modern freedom can feel so heavy. It does not only ask you to choose what to do, it asks you to live with the person those choices are turning you into. And that responsibility is difficult to live with. So most people look for relief, not by giving up freedom completely. That would be too obvious. They look for something quieter, a ready-made answer, a role that works, a version of themselves that the world already knows how to reward. This is where the escape begins. Not escape from a prison, escape from the burden of having to become yourself. And this is where most people make the first mistake. They think the anxiety means they need a better plan, a clearer routine, a stronger mindset, maybe a different job. But here is the problem. A plan can tell you what to do next. It cannot tell you who you are. And when a person does not know who they are, they do not first search for truth. They search for certainty. Think about it. When you feel lost, almost anything that gives you a clear shape can feel like relief. A title, a label, a role, a group, a lifestyle. Something that says, this is what you are. This is where you belong. This is how you should live. And for a moment, the anxiety becomes quieter. Not because the question has been answered, but because the question has been covered. This is why certainty is so seductive. It does not have to be true. It only has to feel stable. But let us go further. Modern society understands this hunger very well. It does not simply sell you products, it sells you identities, a marketplace where every insecurity can be turned into a version of the self. You do not just buy clothes, you buy a way to be seen. You do not just choose a career, you choose a story that makes your life easier to explain. You do not just follow a trend, you borrow a shape for yourself when your own shape feels unclear. This is the strange marketplace of modern life. Identity becomes the product, and insecurity becomes the customer. That is why the system does not need you to know yourself. In many ways, it works better if you do not, because the more uncertain you feel, the more ready-made selves you can be sold. There is a ready-made self for almost everything. Success, beauty, productivity, spirituality, even authenticity. At first, this feels like freedom. You are choosing your style, your path, your beliefs, your way of living. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Not every choice that feels personal actually begins in you. Some choices come from fear, some come from comparison, some come from the quiet need to become understandable to other people. And once that happens, freedom begins to change into something else. It becomes performance. You are still moving, still choosing, still building a life. But underneath all that movement, a different question is running the show. Not what is true for me, but what version of me will work? What version will be accepted? What version will not be left behind? This is where Erich Fromm becomes useful, not as decoration, not as another philosopher to quote, but because he names the pattern. Modern people do not only want freedom, they also look for ways to escape it. That sounds strange at first. Why would anyone escape from freedom? But by now, the answer is clearer. Because freedom is not only open space. Freedom is also uncertainty. It is responsibility. It is the painful fact that no one else can become you on your behalf. So people escape, not by walking back into a prison. That would be too obvious. They escape into roles, approval, belonging, into a version of themselves that the world already knows how to reward. And the most dangerous part is that this escape does not feel like escape. It feels like ambition. It feels like discipline. It feels like self-improvement. It feels like growing up. And sometimes, of course, those things are real. But here is the question we usually avoid. Are you growing as yourself? Or are you improving a mask that was built out of fear? This is where the trap closes. Because a mask can work. It can make you look stable, successful, even safe. But the longer you live through it, the harder it becomes to know what remains underneath. And this is why a person can look free from the outside while feeling strangely absent inside. They are not locked in a prison. They are locked in a version of themselves they have learned to defend. So what can be done? The answer is not to invent another identity. It is not to perform authenticity as if authenticity were one more role to master. The first step is quieter than that. You begin by noticing the pattern, not in theory, but in the small moments where it actually happens. When you want something, pause long enough to ask whether you want it or whether you want the version of yourself that comes with it. When a choice feels urgent, ask whether it's leading you somewhere real or only away from uncertainty. When you feel the need to become more impressive, more acceptable, more complete, ask what kind of fear is speaking through that desire. This does not give you a perfect answer. It does not remove comparison. It does not make freedom easy, but it changes your position. You are no longer simply obeying the pattern. You are beginning to recognize it while it is happening. And that recognition gives you one small pause. Not a perfect answer, not a sudden transformation, just enough distance to ask whether you are choosing freely or only reaching for the safest role available. That pause is where freedom begins to return, not as endless choice, not as the pressure to become someone extraordinary, but as the ability to ask, quietly and honestly, is this life really mine? Or is it only the safest version of myself that I learned to become? Once you notice the mechanism, you cannot fully go back to sleep. And perhaps that is the first step back to freedom.